And this is where it gets scary, because I went back. This was my biggest mistake. I went back and I added up every dollar of BH that I got over the 8 years that I was in. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars that I literally might as well put on this table and lit on fire. I gave it to somebody else. I paid somebody else's mortgage for 8 years. And that hurts, because to think about how I could have left the military, especially for those who are doing the full 20, if I could have left the military with passive income, a shit ton of equity, my life would have looked a lot different. I would have taken a completely different path.
Welcome to the Dynamis podcast, where we're all about unlocking a fruitful life, removing your limiting beliefs, and getting to the next level. My name is Tim Garul, and I'm stoked to grow on this journey with you. As David Geffen says, we are each the figment of our own imagination, and some people have a greater ability to imagine than others. Welcome to the Dynamis podcast. This week, we are going to dive into the military housing, your benefits as a soldier, your VA eligibility as a military active duty soldier and as a veteran. And then also, if you're an investor out there and you're looking for a conservative housing strategy that is going to protect you through market highs and lows, can deliver consistent income, record low, historic low vacancy rates, we're going to talk about how we can partner with the military community to really protect yourself. And this week, I have an expert, James Marszalek from Operation Red Dot, to inform us of all things that we don't know that we should know. And I'm really excited to have him in the studio today. I met James at a commercial RIA meetup in Bellevue. He then came down to our Pints and Properties meetup in Tacoma, and he's just got so much information that I wanted to get it out to the rest of the audience out there in Dynamis land. So James, welcome to the Dynamis studio. Happy to have you here today.
Great to be here, man. Great to be talking. Great to meet you. You run a great group down there in Tacoma, and I just really enjoyed the conversation we had. There's not very many people on your level talking about it and as far as veterans go. And I want to see more people get into this space because there's so much opportunity. So thanks for doing what you do, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, absolutely. And you are right. There's just not enough veterans that are really attacking this space at the level that they should be. Yeah. I have a couple friends from back in the day that are growing into blossoming entrepreneurs. And the interesting thing is that so many veterans come pre-equipped with the skill set to be successful entrepreneurs, and they don't even understand it. There's so many things that are just built into us, driven into our brains from combat or from even basic garrison operations like span of control, setting up systems, that when we apply these basic leadership tools from the military, they translate beautifully into entrepreneurship. And I think if more veterans had access to that information, they'd be less concerned about going to get a bullcrap degree after the military, wasting their GI bill, and really applying it to something that is going to feed them for life instead of making them dependent on another organization. But really quickly, before we jump in...
There's so many things.
I know, there's so many things. So James Marszalek, I would love if you started with your bio. Who are you? How did you get here? Tell us all about why you're qualified to give this message today. But before you do that, I would love the quick story. You were telling me you had a story about your name and basic training.
Yeah, so last name is Marszalek, and nobody can say or spell it for obvious reasons. I look at it, I'm like, what the hell? Who puts two consonants next to each other? That makes no sense. An S and a Z, that's stupid. 30 seconds into basic training, the drill sergeants are coming on the bus and they're screaming. They're doing their typical onboarding into basic training, and they're just going nuts. I was a scout too, so it's not like we're in Fort Jackson. Oh, guys, we need you to come over here and get in a line. No, they're going nuts. And so they get us all off the bus and they're sizing us up and screaming at us. And I had a drill sergeant come over to me. He looked at my name, looked at my face, looked at my name. He goes, F no. Your name is Mars from now on. What's your name? I go, Mars, drill sergeant. He goes, yeah, that's right. He walked away, and that was my name for the next 8 years.
That's hilarious.
He's like, no, we're going to make this real simple for everybody here. I'm not going to say that.
That experience that you're talking about, that is what is commonly referred to as the shark attack. It's like the moment you get off the bus is that basic training.
I loved it.
Yeah, it's the life-changing moment where you're like, Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore.
That's right.
You know?
Like, all right, here we go. Adrenaline's pumping. Everybody's crazy. And I had some, not military experience, but like I was, it's a little bit cheesy, but I was in the Civil Air Patrol for a bunch of years before the military, and so I at least understood facing movements and Latin navigation, search and rescue and stuff like that. So I had some experience. There's no preparing for it until you've been there, but
totally,
I was ready for it, very excited for it.
So. I had a next door neighbor who influenced my decision to join the Army a lot, and so he would have me doing like boot runs and ruck marches and assembling and disassembling weapon systems. So I could do it like blindfolded. He would like make me blindfold myself and So I was prepared. And if you do basic little things when you show up, like
that's it.
Address people by their rank, stand at parade rest, have proper facing movements, all of a sudden you're at the top of
They get you.
Oh, totally.
Oh, platoon leader. Got it. Let's go.
Exactly. Yeah. So my name is Garul. My last name is Garul. And I don't know if you remember, but at the time, so this was like early 2000s, Ja Rule was super popular. Y'all gonna make me lose my mind. Remember that?
Of course.
So
I sang that song.
So my name, all through basic training, became Ja Rule instantly.
Perfect.
And then I had a friend from Puerto Rico. He just got off the bus, came straight from Puerto Rico, had never left the island.
Yeah.
And his name was like Can Pen and blah, 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 alphabet, you know? And they're like, all right, you're Cinderella.
Yeah, right.
So basic training, man, that's how it works.
It's so funny how you can get those names, and pilots do this all the time too. You either get your name based on your name, right? Like our stories, or you fuck up. Yeah. And that becomes the story. And
totally.
Oftentimes those are the better ones.
So give us your bio. Tell us about you, your background, your history, and because what you're doing right now is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge, it's audacious, and it's really servant-based. You are really looking to help a lot of military families, either still active duty or veterans who are looking to start growing their wealth.
Yeah.
And you're doing so by creating systems to partner with them on many fronts. Mm-hmm. You have one of the most audacious goals I've ever heard from an individual.
For me too, yeah.
Let alone a veteran.
Right.
Before we get into what are we talking about, who are you? What's your background? Give us the info.
I think I should start at like 13 years old. I was raised in a really weird household that was a little toxic and just not great. And so I was on my own a lot. And I wanted to have control over the world around me. And so I saw entrepreneurship or side hustling as that means, because it gave me control, which gave me capital, which let me go do what I wanted to do. So at 13, I printed out these business cards. One side, this was in Spokane at the time, one side was lawn mowing, the other side was snow shoveling. And there were 90 or 95 homes in the neighborhood. I would door knock every single one of them every spring. And I would ask them, I'd say, hey, would you please put this card on your refrigerator? And when you need it, would love for you to give me a call. And so I ended up getting 40, 50 people on a consistent basis using me for lawn mowing. And so every weekend, I'm just doing my rounds, pushing my lawnmower all around the neighborhood. In the wintertime, waking up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning because there's a foot of snow on the ground. And again, they're hiring me to clear that out. So that's what I did. Got my first job at 15. McDonald's, loved it. So many shenanigans, got in a lot of trouble. I created the triple cheeseburger, by the way. They didn't give me credit for that. But ultimately, working all the way through and constantly just working on having money. But at 15 years old, I read the book, The Millionaire Next Door. And of course, that's an old book now, but still rings really true in shifting the mindset away from money as an exchange of currency to money as a tool. And after that, read things like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and just went down that rabbit hole of how are wealthy people who have what I would call fuck you money, how do they think about money? How do they think about their wealth? How do they think about how they live their life? What kind of things are they buying? How do they live? That kind of thing. And that book, The Millionaire Next Door, really illustrates the idea that the people that you perceive as rich are actually just debt loaded, very heavy. And they have a lot of things, but they don't have a lot of wealth. They don't have a lot of cash. They don't have a lot of cash flow. And so that immediately shifted my focus into, okay, how can I apply those theories to me? And so instead of being focused on buying that Xbox now, I was focused on buying something that was going to help my business grow more and get more passive cash flow. So I started bringing in friends into my lawn mowing business. And so eventually I was dispatching instead of actually doing the lawn mowing. And so that was very exciting. I leave for basic training. I signed up at 17 and into the pre-program.
What year?
This was 05.
05,
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So we're 4 years into war.
Yeah, yep.
Did you always know you were going to join that?
I always knew. Yeah, third. Once again, I joined Civil Air Patrol at 13. I loved that environment, the standard operating procedures, the ultimate kind of forced respect almost in a certain way through things like chain of command and rank and stuff like that. And so I was very attracted to the military lifestyle in general. I also loved aviation. I was big into planes. The first time that they let me fly a Cessna in the Civil Air Patrol, that was it. I was hooked. I was one of the sickest experiences of my life. And I still want a private pilot's license. I'm still going to move in that direction. It's actually why I joined the Army, long story. But ultimately, yeah, always knew I wanted to go into the military. I was going to go to the Air Force Academy and be an officer. Very glad I didn't do that. But that's what I wanted to do at the time. I ended up deciding that I wanted to fly helicopters. And the Air Force doesn't really have helicopters. The Army has helicopters, and they've got some badass helicopters. So I'm like, yeah, I want to go do that. So pass my flight aptitude test, flying colors, no problem. Past everything else, like they're looking at me going, yeah, you're going to drop a warrant packet. You're going to be good to go. And I'm like technical officer, pilot. That sounded right up my alley. So I go through the whole thing. And the very last thing that they have you go through is a physical. So I go through the physical, pass everything except for one pivotal thing. And that was my eyes. So I wear contacts. I'm wearing them right now. You need 20/20 corrected vision, at least an 05 to go play this game. And so I came back and the recruiter's like, listen, you are 99.9% good to go, but this is a deal breaker. You have to deal with this. I said, what are the options? He goes, well, you go get LASIK surgery, you come back and you're good to go, right? We drop your packet, you're good to go. No parental support whatsoever. This is 05. It was like 20 grand to get this done. So I'm like, no, that's not an option. He goes, the Army gives you an elective surgery during your entire tour of service, and LASIK is one of those. And so if you pick an enlisted job, go get your LASIK, then drop your warrant, you're good. So I ended up going with that, and I was a scout. I'm like, don't put me behind a desk. I want to do something awesome. So scout really appealed to me, the intelligence gathering, but still getting to kick down doors. That was pretty appealing. And of course, the commercial had dune buggies and dudes with suppressed weapons and shit, which of course none of that's real.
Can I just tell you that commercial got me too?
I love that commercial.
So sorry to interject, but
no, you're good.
But quick sidebar story here. When I went to join the Army, I went to enlist. First of all, I always wanted to go fly.
Yeah.
So I thought I was going to join the Air Force again.
Yeah.
When 9/11 kicked off, I was like, I don't have time for that. I'll come back and do that later.
Right.
I got to get there, and I got to get there right now.
Yep.
So I went down to the recruiter's office, and I'm like, I want the coolest job. Like, I want to do the things.
Yeah.
He's like, what about that job? And it was like some guy driving a dune buggy. You know, like coming, like sneaking up this hill.
Popping out of the wheat.
Yeah, totally. And I was like, yeah, what's that job? And they're like, that's a scout.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool. I want to do that. And he's okay. So you'll be assigned armor and whatever, the armor division, whatever. Yep. So I almost became a scout.
Yeah.
And at the very last minute, I heard this guy talking about getting ripped. And I was like, in the recruiter's office. So my initial contract when I first left from MEPS was scout.
Yeah.
And I heard this guy talking about ripped, and I was like, what is that? What is that, ripped? And I watched this video was playing. I could just barely see it back there. And it had this guy like jumping out of airplanes and coming out of water. And I was like, what's that job? That looks way cooler. Right. He's like, nah, you can't have that job. Like,
that's special.
He goes, that's special. That's Ranger. That's like special operations.
Not ripping, it's rip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to try that. He's like, you can't do that. I'm like, bull crap.
Yeah, right.
I can't do that.
Watch me.
Long story short is I did it. So that commercial got me too, man.
Right.
That was my initial
It's
enlistment.
so appealing. I wish any of it were real. It's a fun dream, though. So anyway, to make a very long story short, though, from that time, from leaving to the military, I still had the entrepreneurial bug. The military is very anti-lean, very anti-creativity. They want you to be in the box and following the rules, but I still wanted to have my cake and eat it too. And so in basic training, I snuck out on Sundays when there was only one drill sergeant. This was so dangerous. I never got caught. Hope the drill sergeants aren't watching this now because they'll come get me. But so only one drill sergeant on duty for the entire building. We're cleaning, writing letters. And so I was used to, like I said, I was somewhat accustomed to military lifestyle and military bearing and all those things. But some of these other guys made the decision at the high school recruiting desk that said, sure, F it, let's go do the Army. That sounds cool. They knew nothing about anything. And so they were hurting really bad. And they were hurting for like the comforts of life. And so I'd sneak out, go to the commissary and fill my pockets with candy bars. And I'd have Maxim magazines stuck in my waistband. And I'd come back, magazines $25 a pop because they had cash. They had access to cash every week because you could go to the commissary, but they're checking your bags, your pockets. They're serious about this kind of stuff. You only get what you get.
Yeah.
And candy bars for $5 a piece, king size for $10 a piece, magazines $25. And I walked out of basic training with $3,500 in cash.
Dude, that's awesome.
So that was like, I was hooked at that point. So I got my orders to Fort Wainwright, Alaska. And I'm like, there's a base in Alaska? What? Turns out there's a handful of them. And, Alaska's pros and cons. But anyway, I get up there and I'm like, I want to do something else. So what is there? Well, the internet up there is ridiculous. You got to buy the whole package of cable, home phone, and internet just to have it up there. And so I'm like, that's stupid. All I want is internet. We're not going to play that game. And so I'm a tech guy in the background. And so I set up, I got permission from my commander. I don't know why he let me do this, but he did. I set up a 6-foot omnidirectional antenna on the top of our barracks building. And there were 5 buildings that were side by side, all 3 stories tall. And it was big enough to reach the whole building. And I had it set up like you go to the airport. You pop open your laptop or your phone, you connect, it brings you to a landing page, says how much time do you want? You want an hour? You want a day? You want a week? You want 3 months, 6 months? You got deals as you went further on. And so I had it hooked up. It was software on the router that I ran. And so
Did you build that software?
No.
Okay, so you found this. Created like a white label for yourself.
I just put it all together. And you can put a logo and stuff in there. And it was the 5.1 cav internet is what I called it.
Genius.
And so I had a whole bunch of people who were coming in who, A, just wanted Wi-Fi internet while they were working there, but also the dudes that were single in the barracks were like, I don't want a home phone. I don't need cable. We're pirates of the internet. All we need is internet. It needs to be good internet. So I went to this company and I'm like, I need commercial grade shit. And they're like, yeah, it's X amount of dollars a month. I said, no problem, make it happen. And so I'm hooking into that and broadcasting that across, 500 or 600 people a day. And it was big. It was something that generated a lot of cash flow for me. And then I get orders. We're deploying to Iraq. And when we deploy to Iraq at Wainwright, everybody deploys. The whole base goes. There's only 5,000 people. We were only the only cav unit up there. Everybody else is infantry, which of course, that's a thing. So I had to shut it down. And so I'm on a 24-hour plane ride to Iraq, to Kuwait, and I'm thinking, shit, there goes all my passive income. There's nothing I can do. What else can I do? But also in the back of my mind, I'm like, we're going to a combat zone. I probably should focus on war. That's not a bad idea either. And so the whole plane ride over there, I didn't sleep at all. I'm just racking my brain on, okay, how could I do the same thing? I'm looking for opportunity. Couldn't come up with anything. And so I'm just like, all right, we're here to do a mission. I'm just going to do the mission. 3 weeks later, I'm at Fob Caldwell, and they allowed these Haji business people to come in once they've been approved and vetted to sell knockoff DVDs and electronics and whatever they had. And there's this little bazaar, probably had 6 or 7.
Oh yeah, I bought so much crap from those bazaars.
Yeah, me too.
You buy one DVD, had 20 bootleg movies.
Yep,
it's like some
no label, no English.
It's like some Middle Eastern dude goes into a movie theater and records it on a video camera and then put it on a DVD with 20 other films.
But I mean, here's the idea. When you think about consumer behavior, I'm sitting here thinking American soldiers have access to cash. Finance is going around on a mobile truck and giving you access to cash, American dollars. And the American dollar to the dinar was like, come on, it was the exchange rate was massive. And so I went to some of these guys and I'm like, why are you selling stuff that Americans think are a lower bar? And they're like, this is all we have access to. We don't have a pipeline to get the good stuff. And the light bulb went off. And I went, that's interesting. What if you did? And they're like, we wouldn't know what to do with it or how to price it. I said, okay, right out the gate, I came back to this guy, just one of the guys, and I said, what if I fronted a test? I said, let me buy a laptop, let me buy an MP3 player, let me buy a digital camera. And that was really the core things. What would people want to be buying? External hard drives, stuff like that. And I went to a couple of websites that were doing like bulk last year's model type stuff. And they were it was pennies on the dollar. And I had to go to a place that shipped to APO. My mail guy hated me. I'm surprised I didn't get in trouble for this one too. So I'm wholesaling electronics to these Haji guys. So I just bought a small pack. It was 3 of each thing. I told them how to price it. I said, here's what I'm going to sell it to you for. I'm going to front the money. So you don't need to pay me until they're gone. And so I was about getting ready to go out the wire on a 3-day mission. So I said, here, all right, it came in. Here's the stuff. Here's what you need to price it at. Here's a little sign I put together for you.
So what were you selling? You were selling
laptops, MP3 players, Zunes.
Why weren't you just directly selling it to the consumer? Why weren't you going B2B?
Because I didn't want to spend the time.
So you wanted to use the local guy at the bazaar as essentially...
I just wanted to wholesale.
So you would give him the goods bulk.
Yep.
You'd get it in the mail, give him bulk. He would sell it and then give you the split.
He was making profit that was probably 200% what he was used to. And so I was able to also increase profit on that end because, again, the dollar to dinar, he's looking at the numbers going, shit, if I make $1 on this, I'm murdering the game, right? So I was able to make way more than I would have if I sold it to them directly anyway. And I had to do way less work. I was a middleman. The only physical work that I did was taking the boxes that my mail guy delivered to me, unpackaging them, seeing what I got, and then handing it off. That was it.
Dude, that
was
crazy.
Nice. Walked out of Iraq. Again, surprised customs didn't pull me down on this one, but it was about $26,000 or $27,000 in cash.
Unbelievable.
So that was pretty cool. So I come back to Alaska. I set up the internet again for a little bit, and then I got out of the military in 2012. And now, just like anybody else who ETS is out, the train stops. And you get off and the train keeps going, right? The mission continues. And so now I'm sitting here going, what's next? And so I started business school because I felt like that was the most appropriate thing to do. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I was not going to work for anybody else again. So I'm like, all right, what now? So I get halfway through business school and I get this opportunity I see a spot. So I'm living in Spokane at the time. I see the spot to open up a head shop and a cafe in Cheney, which is 4 blocks away from Eastern Washington University. It's a little college town. and nothing like it existed. There's just nothing out there. And so all these college kids who are e-cig smokers and hookah guys and all the other good stuff.
Paraphernalia.
And this is when it's still, we don't have I-502 here in Washington yet. And so it's still illegal. And these are for tobacco use only, right?
Even now, I own this little commercial building in Tacoma, and the downstairs storefront is paraphernalia.
Yeah.
Do you know how incredibly difficult it still is to get insurance on a building like that?
It's because it's still a schedule. That's a whole other conversation, but you're right. It's stupid. So I did that for about 18 months, and we had a massive grand opening. I gave away 3 kegs worth of beer. We had live entertainment. 800 people came through. I have a time-lapse video, the whole thing. It's sick. But ultimately, I over-leveraged. So I did an SBA-backed VA business loan. I raised about $125K in capital and then put in 75 of my own. Ended up just not really connecting with that industry as much as I thought I was going to. It did well, so I sold it. About 18 months later, because I had a very unique opportunity to go take part in the gold rush in North Dakota for oil. And so I sold everything and moved to North Dakota. Didn't have a CDL license, didn't have a place to live, didn't have a job lined up, but I knew guys that worked there. And so I knew that if I got there, I could put something together. Because of the military driver's license that I had from when I was in the military, North Dakota let me skip commercial driving school. And they said, if you can pass the test, we'll give you your CDL. So I studied for the test and passed it. Within 3 weeks, I had a commercial driver's license. Never driven an 18 speed in my life. And man, was that a learning curve, because there was no parking lot training here. The guy who hired me saw that I had a CDL and gave me a truck. A lot of learning going on there. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm on a hill and I stalled the engine because I'm trying to shift and there's all this and I'm loaded with oil, and we were doing doubles. So I had a really experienced guy in the back. And so I got traffic behind me and I'm stuck on this freaking hill and I'm like, John! So that was a lot of fun. But ultimately from about 2014 to late 2015. So it was, again, about another 15 to 18 months in the oil fields.
Make it till you make it, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I picked it up really fast, and I ended up getting 4 trucks and trailers. We had crews running 24 hours a day. I was killing it over there. It was so crazy because it was a boom. It was a gold rush all day. And so there was more money than I've ever seen move around in a short amount of time. And then the gold rush promptly ended when OPEC started sticking they're very threatened by us drilling oil. And so they have the ability through supply to manipulate the price of oil. So when it's $150 a barrel, everybody's getting bonuses and everybody's fat and happy. But in less than 4 months, it went from $115 a barrel to $38. And we're not even breaking even at that number. So everybody capped the wells, 1,200 drilling rigs, which are worth like $250,000 a piece, plus a lot plus on that side, just stopped.
Which, if our administration was smart, not to get political, I don't even know who was president during that time.
Right.
They would have bought a metric shit ton of oil to fill the strategic reserve at a discounted price. But
I think there's some of that going on in the background. But anyway, the oil field crashed, and so now I'm stuck again. Boom goes bust, and I'm sitting on some personal household goods. I sold all the trucks and trailers, laid off all my drivers. But okay, what's next? Meanwhile, in the background, this whole time since I got out of the military, and I'm gonna talk about this in a minute, but my entire time in the military, never bought a house, never used my VA home loan because I was told I couldn't. It's a long story. We'll talk about that later. But ultimately, when I got out of the military, real estate was always lurking in the background as something that I wanted to get into. And so when I got out of the military, I started flipping homes, started buying rental properties. I wholesaled a handful of properties. And I guess that's important to talk about. We are bioing here, right? Flip 19 homes, wholesale 21. I own 9 rental doors currently. That's fluctuated here and there. So on the real estate investor side, like that's what's happened between now and when I got out of the military. But ultimately, I left North Dakota and I put about 10, I'm a pretty analytical dude. So I put 10 cities on the map and said, okay, here's all the criteria that I'm looking at that I actually want to get into. And I gave each a numerical value and graded them all. And Tacoma, Washington kept coming way above the rest, JBLM specifically. And it's the 3rd biggest base in the country. Real estate market, I saw data-wise, was on the upward trend. I knew just based on market cycles that we were about to really get hot.
And steady, too. If you look at Tacoma in national declines, Tacoma stays steady.
It's very insulated from distress.
People overlook it, though, because they're like, it's dirty, it's grit city, it's not Seattle.
I wouldn't touch Seattle with a 10-foot pole,
Me
real
neither.
estate-wise. That's a hard pass for me. But yeah, so I ultimately landed in Tacoma in 2015 and said, okay, I'm going to do this professionally now. I'm going to get into real estate, and started Operation Red Dot as a brand, but I was hanging my license under other people and stuff like that. And so since then, closed about $150 million in gross sales. I currently have about $75 million in assets under management in the property management division. Helped tons of investors with development projects and off-market transactions and flips and all that kind of different stuff. So we've done a lot, both in the residential space. We've done commercial deals. We've helped investors. We've been investors in multiple deals. That's the long side of it, but without getting into the real deep details. But
I love your story because it really speaks to your character and your spirit, right? You have this just drive of like, that didn't work, let's try this.
Yeah.
Oh, you're opportunistic.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's a very important mindset to have, to be flexible and agile, because this podcast is really focused on people who are growing in their investing journey and their entrepreneurial journey, and mindset is so paramount. It's central in that. And I think so many people get fixated on an identity as one thing. I am a real estate investor.
Yep.
You are.
Yeah.
But you're an entrepreneur and you're flexible in opportunity. So if an opportunity does not present itself, you're easily able to pivot and double down in that direction. I think that's very important.
There's something that I heard recently that's really relevant to that. It's, if you're an NFL coach and you get hired to be an NFL coach, you're probably getting hired because you have a really good plan on paper, right? You know where to take the team and who to put on the team, right? This is a Jim Collins good to great conversation of having the right people on the bus and all that kind of different stuff. But I don't believe that's what makes the best kind of NFL coach, or in this particular instance, an entrepreneur. You need to have that. You have to have a good plan. The plan on paper needs to be logical. It needs to have teeth. It needs to be able to work. But at the end of the day, it's the in-game decision-making, the real-time reactionary decision-making that makes you a great entrepreneur.
Yeah, I 100% agree. By the way, your story is
it's wild,
extremely entertaining.
Yeah, I love it.
I love that. And you were talking about just like the capitalistic entrepreneurial nature of just figuring out how to make money. Side note really quickly, my son, for whatever reason, kids love these drinks called Prime.
Oh, yeah.
And so he was telling me, like, kids are buying these drinks for like $10 to $15 a piece at school, because if you have it on the playground, it's a commodity. Yeah. We were at Costco last week, and I looked over and I saw a case, and I was like, yo,
let's try it.
I'll front you the money.
Yeah, there we go.
I'll front you the money. You pay me back from your profits.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'll seed your little venture. I was like, put them in your lunchbox, keep them cold and out on the playground, like when everybody's hot.
Hey, kid.
Exactly.
Want some Prime? Yeah, I love that. I love that.
So you made a comment that you said through this whole time you never bought a house.
Yeah, yeah.
And I want you to tell that story.
It's such a horrible story.
So before we do, let me just preface it with this. If you are listening to this podcast and you are a veteran, or you are on active duty,
especially active duty,
listen up, active duty soldiers, right now. If you're on active duty, somebody on active duty, a friend, a cousin, a neighbor whose kid is on active duty, you are entitled through the VA to qualify for a home loan that is zero money down.
I don't even like the word home. It's a property loan.
Totally.
Because listen, I'm just going to say this. Let me preface this whole story with this. The federal government, the military, is paying our active duty service members to be real estate investors. I'm going to say that again. The federal government is paying active duty service members to be real estate investors. The basic allowance for housing can only be used in one of three ways. You can live on base, which means you don't see a dime of that BH. It just goes right over to our privatized military housing company. Shitheads. You can rent off base, which means if I'm the landlord, you're paying me your BAH. And if you're lucky, if you're really lucky in today's market, you're capturing some of that back, but probably not. So you're giving it away in both of those two situations. But if you purchase, the government is giving you that housing allowance to go into something that you get to capture equity for. So not only do you benefit from the appreciation and the upside, but you also are letting the government pay your mortgage.
Yeah, listen to that point right there. When you are active duty in the military, you get this entitlement called BAH, Basic Housing Allowance, okay? Which means that they are paying for your monthly housing.
Yeah.
If you use that in combination with a VA loan, which entitles you to a zero down loan, and if you have any disability at all, your funding fee, the cost of that loan is completely waived. So no money down, potentially no closing costs, and the government is giving you a check every month to make that mortgage payment.
And this is where it gets scary, because I went back This was my biggest mistake. I went back and I added up every dollar of BH that I got over the 8 years that I was in. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars that I literally might as well put on this table and lit on fire. I gave it to somebody else. I paid somebody else's mortgage for 8 years. And that hurts, because to think about how I could have left the military, especially for those who are doing the full 20. If I could have left the military with passive income, a shit ton of equity, my life would have looked a lot different. I would have taken a completely different path.
So I do a ton of education with veterans. If I meet a veteran and they're on active duty and they have a family or they're living off post and they're paying rent, I immediately ask them, why are you not using your benefits?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
And they'll say things to me like, I'm only here for a couple of years. I don't really know the area.
Short-term thinking.
Totally.
Short-term thinking.
And it's like, dude, you and all your little friends are paying rent somewhere.
Yeah.
You might as well be living for free, pocketing your BAH, renting out rooms to your friends, and everywhere you move, picking up one of these assets. Yeah. And by the time you are out, whether it's 5-year commitment or 20 or 30, you have passive income streams that will help you thrive in that transition, because we see so many veterans spiraling as they get out of the military. They don't know what to do. They have, all of a sudden, they have purpose, they have income, all of that's cut off. So what do? We send them to college. They collect a little bit of GI Bill for a while, but ultimately they're not building anything. They're not contributing to anything. Most of their skills, although they say are relatable and can translate to other industries, no, they don't. No, they don't. They say that. It's a great pitch. Right. But ultimately, it's like, what are you building? And if the government is incentivizing and paying for you to build this little nest egg that's appreciating in value, why are you not?
I'll tell you why I didn't. I didn't because I was told by an E7 when I got in, this was a platoon sergeant level person, that, oh, you can't buy. You can't buy. He said that. You can't buy because it's a VA benefit. He goes, healthcare is a VA benefit. You don't get that till you're out. Your VA home loan, that's a veteran benefit. You're not a veteran yet. You're still active duty. Now, of course, that was grossly negligently incorrect, but it was never corrected because the government is also not in the business of educating their service members on their benefits, right? And they're also not in the business of real estate. So they don't really touch or talk about this at all. You go to the housing office, the only support they give you is here's a list of hotels while you're on the 8-month wait list.
And we're going to talk about that. We're going to get to that. So remember that.
I know, but I will. So in this particular context, though, if I were to go back and do everything over again, I'm thinking in terms of a snowball. A snowball is an exponential conversation, but it has to be packed at the beginning, right? We're packing that snowball nice and tight. We're going to set it down at the top of the mountain and we're going to start rolling it like you're building a snowman, right? And eventually, you're rolling this snowball downhill. It's going to get so big and roll so fast that you can no longer physically keep up with it anymore. It rolls on its own. It self-sustainably grows and builds speed and size without you even touching it. So the question is, and that's what I call the tipping point. Before that happens, you're still physically putting pressure and capital and new properties in the mix to get to that tipping point. But once you hit that tipping point, you're done. And I don't think veterans and especially active duty service members understand how closely tangible that snowball really is for them, especially because they don't have to pay for it.
It's completely tangible. You have to understand though, like when people come into the military, they have no financial background whatsoever. Okay. It's people that are coming from the streets. Yeah. Most of the military, I'm not going to say all, but most of enlisted military needs the military.
Yeah.
It's a place to go for them to go. Yep. And they're getting financial advice from people who have just been in longer than them, who have no experience financially outside of managing their LES each month. Right. Or from like young lieutenants or captains who at the time when you're a lower enlisted, you're like, this is a grown up. Right. In hindsight now, I meet these guys and I'm like, you are all idiots.
Listen
like,
here, Butterbar.
Totally.
All right.
And so I remember my best friend went to buy a house when he was a private in the military, got married, he's buying a house. I remember physically our PL, our platoon leader, holding him on his shoulders and saying, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can physically remember this conversation. Yeah. There just needs to be some sort of intervention, and which is exactly the mission that you're on. It's a lot of what I'm doing is trying to get ahead of these veterans and educating them about how to pack and start this snowball. Because do you remember the day that you realized that you could have purchased property in the military while you're active duty?
The worst day of my life.
What did that feel like?
It was the sinkingest gut feeling you can imagine. I wasn't licensed as an agent at the time, so I'm buying my first house after getting out. I'm like, I got my DD-214. I'm like, yes, I can go buy a house now. And so I found an agent. And I reached out to this guy, hey, I just got out of the military. I want to buy my first house. He goes, cool. When he found out what was really going on, he's like, I don't think you're going to like hearing this, but the information you got was no good. It was bad intel, and you could have bought this entire time. And I'm just like, what do you mean I could have bought this whole time? Like I was about to hit him, and he wasn't even the problem. It's like, what the hell? So I made up for it, obviously. Once that light bulb went off, I went, oh, that asshole. And I went out and I said, okay, I'm going to make up that time. I'm going to make up that money. And I did. But I would have been 10, 15 steps ahead. Yeah. This is about, to me, when I talk about the active duty snowball, I'm talking about financial freedom and I'm talking about generational wealth. Those are the two major pillars of this conversation.
And philosophical freedom.
Yeah,
if you have financial freedom, look, veterans, honestly, we're doing a better job as a community, as a nation, of recognizing that cost of that commitment, that service. But by and large, there's this transition period where you feel incredibly unattached, incredibly disenfranchised, and you don't really know what you are holding on to, what's anchoring you post-military experience. And if you have financial freedom, it allows you to pursue your interests and fight for what you truly believe in, instead of being forced to bend the knee because an employer is saying, if you want your little paycheck,
that's right,
come do what I say.
Work. Right? It really is about the rat race and escaping that rat race. So what I tell people is, think about what your life would look like with $10,000 a month in a paycheck. It's pretty good. $10K a month, not bad at all. That's $120K a year, but you have to trade your time for that money, right? That's how the rat race works. But what if that money came in regardless of whether or not you got out of bed and went to work? Think about it. It's a thought exercise. Really sit down and think about, what hobbies would I be able to pick up? How much time would I be able to spend with my family and friends? What kind of things would I, as James, want to do because I can, instead of having to allocate a big portion of my life into something that I don't actually want to do? Right? So the financial freedom part is about me waking up in the morning, looking at myself in the mirror and going, what does James want to do today? Without the consideration of, do I have the money to do that? And do I have the time to do that? That's what financial freedom ultimately buys you, is flexibility and what I call freedom to move about the cabin, right? When you hit cruising altitude, the snacks come out.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's where we're trying to get.
I think so many people, they have these ideas of why it's not going to work. I don't know real estate. I don't want to be a landlord. I'm PCSing.
All of those big and valid concerns, by the way. But you can't just stop there. And let's go down a rabbit hole. Let's figure out how to mitigate those risks, and let's educate ourselves.
But so many
Type it into YouTube, for God's sake. Come on.
So many of those concerns are easily overcomable.
Oh, yeah.
So many. Look, you're going to move anyways, okay? You don't want to be a landlord? Fine. Hire a property management company. Take a phone call once a month or once a quarter and check in and make sure everything's going okay. You're worried about vacancy rate? Rent it out to your friends who are still at the unit. And guess what? Tell them it's from the unit. And guess what they're going to do when they move out? They're going to get one of their homies in the barracks and get them to move in. And so on and so forth. And you know, the VA, look, it's a primary residence loan. Okay, it's a zero down loan, primary residence. If you're getting PCS, if you have orders to go somewhere else, okay, you can easily justify purchasing a new primary residence and vacating your existing, okay? And
there's exceptions to the rules. The VA loan is very versatile.
Bro, it's the most powerful tool. When I look at, if I was an agent, especially in this area, and I was receiving an offer for the VA loan, I'd be like, this one gets priority. Because
100%.
It's guaranteed financing. It's insured by the U.S. government. They're incredibly, and not to mention, there's a lot of agents who VA loans. Now, I don't like them. We're going to take a conventional offer VA.
This is less secure, is what I've met agents that have that mentality.
Which couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. And also, they're completely crapping on the veteran community.
Thanks for supporting your heroes.
Yeah. And here's the other thing that makes the VA loan so powerful, and a lot of people don't know this. So you can do a 0% down loan. You could do zero closing costs. And the VA loan is the only loan that you can get a credit from the seller and cash out. You could walk away from closing, not paying anything, take money out of the purchase and pay off your credit card, pay off your car. And then you can leave this property
with one of your friends who's going to keep renting it out and then send it back to the barracks or a property management company. And you're just acquiring these properties as you're PCSing around.
Yeah. So I bought a fourplex in Tacoma in 2019. That's actually where I'm living now. It's a 2-bed, 2-bath house with a detached triplex on an acre. Kick-ass spot. Got the seller to put in $22K worth of closing costs. All my closing costs got covered. 0 down loan, like you said. I was cash flow positive. I get paid $1,400 a month to live there, and that's after all my expenses. So I'm cash flowing on top of that, just on one property. But with that extra closing cost money, paid off a credit card. I bought a gun safe, I bought 2 washers and dryers, and I bought $5,000 worth of Amazon gift cards. And the seller paid that off through escrow. When I say the VA loan can be used in ways that you don't even understand, that's what I mean. There are so many little nuanced bonuses and little pockets and corners that a lot of loan officers and agents don't even know about. And that's why it's like when I hear people say, well, I just don't know anything about that, or I have this concern, I say, great. I'm glad that you have a roadblock in your mind because we can go explore that. Let's go see if it's really a roadblock or if it's just a roadblock because you don't know shit about what it is, right?
My favorite is
that's where I started too, by 100%. The way. Nobody starts knowledgeable. Like I went and found it and I'm trying to help other people with the same path.
Well, even me as a veteran, same thing. I didn't buy a house until I got out of the military. And I was like, oh, I can't wait. I got out. I can't wait to buy. I can't wait to buy. And then even using my VA entitlement, okay, I didn't know crap about it. And going through the process, the person that I worked with also didn't know about it. And so years later...
It's a 0 down loan. Totally. That's all they knew.
Years later, I was like, okay, it is now my mission so that other people don't make the same mistake that I've made. I want to empower people with this information. And the VA loan, I mean, it's incredible. So hear what we are saying. If you're a veteran, here's my favorite.
Talk to someone who knows.
Totally.
Ask them.
Here's my favorite thing is that when I get a buyer come in the pipeline and I'm looking at their file and all of a sudden I see this little VA disability.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are you going...
I saved thousands of dollars.
Why are you going conventional?
Yeah, right.
Well, we heard that the VA loan isn't good. So I have an entitled veteran who's not using their benefit that they sacrificed for because somebody told them that people don't like VA loans. It's
bad
bonkers.
Intel.
Here's what I want to do. There's so much information jam-packed into this. What a great first episode here. Okay. And the meat and potatoes of this episode is if you are a veteran, there is entitlement for you to use to grow passive income streams and grow the pursuits of your passion in life. Use them. Okay.
Active duty or not.
The
snowball can be built for everybody.
Yes. So here's what we're going to do. This is now on the fly, a 2-part episode.
Yeah, love it.
And we're going to wrap up episode 1 right here.
Yeah.
So, James, I would love, let's close this out with where people can get in touch with you. And then if you are listening to this episode, what I'm going to do is continue this conversation on in episode 2 because we would be missing out if we did not hear what James is working on right now because there are some crazy, audacious...
It gets nuts.
It gets nuts. So buckle up. James, take us home here. Bring us to the finish line. How can people get in touch with you? How can they find you? Social media, LinkedIn, all of it.
I think LinkedIn probably is the best. You just type in my name. If you want to see a bunch of space facts and nerd shit, find me on Facebook.
I love space.
Yeah.
You've been looking at the James Webb telescope
all
images?
day. Yeah. I stayed up for Christmas and watched the launch.
Did you watch the Netflix documentary on the James Webb? Oh my gosh.
I've seen them all, man. I'm a giant space nerd.
I watched it 3 times.
So many analogies to life in general also. So Facebook, that's a personal brand that I've got there. But LinkedIn is my professional. The website, operationreddot.com, is where you're going to get connected with us and find out what we're all about and what we're doing. And there's a bunch of interesting little nuggets there.
Give us a preview for the next episode of what you're working on.
So I believe real estate companies, brokerages, agents are very hyper geo-focused. And that makes sense, right? Because if I'm going to show a house, I'm not going to drive to North Carolina, right? The government's moving 400,000 service members a year. That's a big deal. And that means their families and their dogs and their household goods and everything else. And there's nobody, including the Department of Defense, that's really making sure that process is smooth for service members. And so I have an ambition to bring Operation Red Dot National to 75 of the biggest duty stations across the country for the purpose of being able to play traffic director and basically get their housing secured before they're even on the ground. I'm trying to eliminate the 8 months in the hotel.
And as the great Wayne Gretzky famously said, if you want to be successful, you have to skate in the direction of the path of progress. So you're trying to put yourself where the puck is going, not where it is right
That's
now.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Long game.
Guys, stick around. Listen to episode 2 because we're about to blow the cork off of this thing. James, I'm so stoked to have you here. I could tell we could probably do a couple hours.
We could, easily.
And maybe we might have to have you back.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Thank you guys for listening to this week's episode. Stay tuned for episode 2 of James. I'm telling you, you're not going to want to miss it. We will catch you guys on the flip side.